Being a professional isn't about the money you make, the position you hold, your level of expertise, or fame. It's the motivation and the attitude you bring to your work, a desire for always learning and improving, and balancing your creative output with getting the business done. Welcome and join the Creating Pros. Hi, and welcome back to Creating Pros. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and this week we're running just a little late from a few tech issues, but hey, it happens, right? So this week, I'm not going to do what I originally had planned on for the show. There's a lot of things going on in the world, and we also look at some conversations I've had with a lot of people over the last couple of weeks. I was doing a show this weekend, talking about marketing, talking about how do you go about reaching people and reaching people with messaging. And really, I thought that it would be worthwhile to talk a little bit this week about a couple of things that I think get lost a lot of the time. And this is the ideas of clarity and simplicity. I think that a lot of the time when we say something, we post something on social media, we may write books, articles, things like this, things that are clear to us, things that reflect who we are, things that how we perceive the messaging we've communicated are not the way the rest of the world perceives them. To go back to that, old adage of, I don't think that means what you think it means. I think we're seeing a lot of that these days as people rebrand, repost, put things that are out there. It seems to be that we're operating with a lot of that. So on the show this weekend, got into conversation and we were looking at what are the top things you don't want to do and what are the things you do want to do using messaging, branding, social media. And this was around artists, authors, creativity. But I think that this holds true regardless, business, personal, whatever. We have to be very clear on what we communicate to the world. We have to be very open and very understanding about the things that we say, the things that we do, and honestly, about how we communicate those things. One idea that we have, you go back a while back, we did a show about translations and how things don't translate well when you're changing languages. Well, here's another fun truth of that. Often things don't translate well when we just think it's an interesting joke, when we just think it's an interesting piece of news, when we take a meme and just repost it. Often we don't necessarily understand the full messaging that is behind that, or why certain people will be or won't be attracted to that, or the full story behind certain ideas and concepts. I was working with somebody yesterday, in fact, and we were talking about this idea of clarity. We were working on how do we educate, how do we inform, how do we do all of these kinds of things that really are necessary, whether you're writing fiction, you're doing nonfiction, you're running a legal practice. I don't really care. But this idea of clarity, and I was speaking to a marketing person, and we were talking about how do I make sure that what's in my head is what's being communicated, and how what I'm communicating is how it's being received by who I want to receive it. We have become very driven by the idea of I can say anything, I can do anything, and I can put anything out there at a moment's notice and not think twice about it. We do these things often because we're accustomed to being able to do that. And one of the things that often people don't necessarily see or understand or really fully understand consequences of are how those things are perceived. And when there's blowback and people don't understand blowback from it, this is coming from the fact of a conversation I was having with somebody about something that was posted. kind of without a whole lot of thought behind it. It was like, oh, yeah, I agree with that. That makes perfect sense. They reposted it and took a lot of blowback to the point of pulling things down. I'm not going to say they're shutting down social media, but they're pulling a lot of things down at the moment. We can say things, we can post things, we can put things out in our messaging that we think say one thing, but really have a lot greater connotation, have a much wider message, have a much more impactful message to people than what we necessarily or think we're saying or communicating. And as we are moving through right now very challenging times, as we are looking at and moving into holiday seasons, as we are moving into a lot of things are changing. One of the things that we'll be talking about here in the next few weeks is going to be looking at the economics of the way the landscape is changing, looking at the way that the political landscape is changing, and how these things are going to affect all of us. They're going to affect creative businesses. They're going to be affecting creators. They're going to be affecting pretty much everyone on the planet. And these things are accelerating. Well, to be able to understand, adapt, and be ready for these challenges, the ability to be clear in our message is going to be critical, or there's going to be unintended consequences, both to the positive and negative. So the one thing I'm going to be challenging everybody to do as you're looking at your messaging, whether it's advertising, whether it is things you're posting socially, whether it's the work you're putting out, the timing of things that are going out, having clarity means a lot of different things. Having clarity means you know and understand what it is you're trying to say and why. Having clarity means you have a pretty good idea of how your audiences are going to receive these things. You have a pretty good idea of what they're looking for. You have a pretty good idea on how you're going to connect with them. This is one of those things I think has become all too easily lost as we write, as we speak, as we put things again on social media. If you're looking at leveraging and using these platforms to help build business, to help build communications, to help build connections with other people and sustain those connections over time, having clarity within yourself is going to mean that you're taking the time, putting in the intention, and understanding what you're communicating. It also means understanding the biases that you're bringing to the message that you're putting out there. It means understanding that how you think you're communicating something is not going to be received that way by all audiences. So this week is going to be kind of a short one, but I think that this is an important message and something to consider as we're looking at things right now. Please take and be intentional in your communication. Please take and be clear in your communication. And I would challenge that right now is a good time to look, reflect, and contemplate before you take any actions and before you start communicating with the world. So until next week, this has been Creating Pros.